What's up, everybody? Do you have trouble trusting in the future that things will work out? Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we are talking about how
Yes.
to have faith. I know. A resounding yes across the board. This is
Yeah.
the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's up, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
Oh,
Oh God.
this is a big one. This is one that's probably one of the more difficult things in life. But there was Marcus Aurelius. He was saying you can have anything you want in the world right now if you will only forget the past, have faith in the future, love what you have, and act right.
Yeah, and not really that demanding of a list, honestly, but it's still
No.
hard. It's very hard. It's like a few things, right? And
Hmm.
you know what's funny I find about faith is like I'm sure we mentioned this before, but like it's one of those things where like it's so easy to have like positivity, faith in the future and stuff when things are going well. It's super easy. Soon as things take a turn though, it's like the way that it transforms is almost comical. It's like you can have so much faith for like 6 months, everything's going great. You have one bad day, you get a cold or something, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's gonna be horrible. I can't do this anymore. I don't have the energy to get through this. It's too hard, too difficult, like the future's gonna be miserable. It's like it just falls apart. What
Yeah.
happens?
And you know what's crazy is that it's the same exact thing because whether we believe the future is going to be good or it's bad, we're still believing something that's imaginary.
Yeah. Yeah,
So like
yeah,
we're
exactly.
but like it's like who designed this brain, this species, this mechanism that we have that's just so much easier to just think about the bad things that'll happen. It'll never work out. Like I struggle with this on a
I don't
regular
know.
basis where it's like trying to have faith that my future is going to work out. Like every day I put in work to make sure that my future is better than my present. And yet still every day it's just like, oh, am I going to make it? I don't think I'm going to survive. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny. Like I literally I do the same thing. I do every day. I'm doing something to try and get towards a goal or do something. And it's like, yet it still is scary. Still stresses me out. I still have anxiety about it. And like it's funny. Like, I feel like it's gotten better with time a little bit. Like I don't have as many like full blown panic attacks about it. I think as you start to get things, that has been my experience. As I've gotten more things in order in my life and going in the direction I want, and there's more like authenticity in there. I think that has helped, but it hasn't like totally like you think it would solve the problem at one point, right? And you just would have faith. Because the other funny thing is like, yeah, it's like you said, I mean, neither of those is true. They're both imaginary. And the funny thing is like I've noticed like if you don't have faith that things will work out, they won't most of the time. Because it's like you essentially become like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where your negativity just starts to and kind of churn up and it gets more and more negativity and that just kind of makes things you know however you're thinking about them, like the world will become that way. It'll become negative, right? It'll become against you. And I've seen so many people like that. It's miserable and it's like, well, I don't want to be like that. So need some kind of faith.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hmm. Like there so Wim Hof, he's this guy who invented this breathing methodology. And he did an interview with Tim Ferriss, and at the end of the interview, Tim Ferriss is like, if you have one thing that you want to leave everybody with, what would it be? And he said, have faith. Like out of everything that he could have said,
Yeah,
he said, have faith. And I kind of look back at like my times in my past because really most things worked out pretty well. Like we're
yeah,
still here, we're still
yeah.
alive, still doing better. Like most of the things that I was scared were going to turn out poorly, they still turned out pretty okay. So like, why would this time be any different?
You know what's funny? Just to give you like a very concrete example in that sense, like we both spent how many years in school? And I can say this knowing, I mean, I'm gonna guess you're still going through this on your side too, because I know you're back in school again for real, like back in regular school. How many years we each spent in school? Every semester would end, and I always had papers due. And every semester, I'd be like, I'm not gonna get them all done. There's no way I'm gonna get them all done. And I start to panic, and it's like, but yet I've proven that I could every time before, so why would that matter? You know?
I know it's dude, it's like every week because I do online classes, so they just give you a ton of stuff on Monday and then you have to finish it by Sunday. And every week I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to do all of this. And then every week it's all done. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's like
crazy.
I think that's part of it is maybe like it is like building that confidence that you can do it. But it's like even when you prove you've done it numerous times in the past, even the same basic thing, it's still that it's like that fear, and the fear is so quickly, just goes crazy.
And you know what is funny? It's not like a helpful fear. It's
God
not
no.
like having the fear that I'm not going to survive or I'm not going to make it is actually helpful to getting stuff done because it just causes stress. And then I'm distracted thinking about this like worst case scenario thing instead of like because like when I actually do have faith, my mind is very calm and I'm just like, okay, we can just do this. But
Yeah.
when I'm stressed out, thinking about a billion things, it's never going to work, and it just complicates stuff.
You know what's funny? Fear is very helpful when you're like walking on a mountain, you see that it's icy, and you're like, I shouldn't step there because I might fall. Like
Yeah.
it's, but I think it's like I don't. It's like all of our other emotions. It's not very good at distinguishing like nuances and degrees of things. It's like kind of an all or nothing. It's like I'm gonna fall and die, so I shouldn't go, right? So you want to keep yourself away from that ledge. And it's like I think it's just like fear works that way. It's like a flight or fight response, right? It's like it just all of a sudden it's either turned on or it's off. You feel secure and safe, or there's something you're scared of. And like, I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day because like, walking my dog and stuff, like he'll jump when he sees like a paper bag on the ground blow in the wind or something, because like they're worried about stuff like that. They don't know what it is and it moves and it could be something in there, you don't know. So it's like you're getting prepared. And I feel like our fear is kind of like that. It's irrational usually. It kind of runs away. And when our imagination kicks in with it, it just goes like hog wild. Like, because it's so funny to think, the other day I had the thought, I think I told you, I texted you, it was like, I've been sick, I'm getting over it. And like the one day I was really sick and I was like I was having these thoughts like, oh, I was tired, I didn't sleep well, and I was like, oh, I'll never be able to get all this stuff done I want to get done. I just don't have the energy to get through life. It's too hard. And then I was like, I'm just tired and sick. I need to take a nap. So I took a nap and I felt a little bit better, like, but it's like my imagination just ran with like the present feeling and then just carried it out to infinity. And like I acted my whole life was going to be like that. Obviously, it's not.
Hmm. Yeah, but in that moment, it totally 100% feels like that.
Yeah,
And that's like,
it's insane.
yeah, it's funny how like, pain, I guess initially in the body, pain and discomfort were there for a beneficial reason. But I think a lot of times they just cause a lot of mental suffering that's not really necessary.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they do because we get uncomfortable with our discomfort, we don't want to deal with it. It gets hard, and then it makes us think everything's going to be like that forever. Even when and I think that's the hardest part for me is the imagination of the future. When you start thinking that way, it just gets,
Hmm.
yeah, it's difficult.
So how does one have faith in the future, in the universe, in things turning out okay?
I think
Well,
one thing
actually,
that helped. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. What were you
I
gonna
when I was asking that question, I actually had a thought
say?
that
Okay.
no matter whether we think things are going to turn out good or bad, we have faith. It's just when we say have faith, we interpret that to mean have faith in things turning out good. But if we think things are going to turn out bad, we're having faith that things will turn out poorly.
That's true. Actually, yeah, it is still a belief that things are going to happen that way, that things are going to fall into place that way. Yeah, so that is true. We still have faith. We just maybe need to tweak it.
Yeah, right?
It's actually pretty good. Yeah, I was gonna say we've talked about before what is it called? Where you imagine something like 1,000 times happening.
Oh, yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know the term for that? I can't remember off the top of
Nope.
my head right now. Still getting
Future
over it.
no, I don't know.
It's damn, we'll think of it later. But yeah,
Mhm.
so it's from the Stoics, the idea of trying to imagine, like, if something bad happens, imagine it happening, like, not just once or 10 times, but 1,000 times. Would you still react the same way? I think the example of the one guy we watched, he was talking about a shirt, like, washing a new shirt and it shrinks and being mad, like this nice shirt that you just got, you ruined it. And it's like, well, what if that happened 1,000 times? Like, how would you react to it? And chances are, it's like that repetition kind of makes us more resilient to it and makes us think of it less of a big deal. It's like, all right, this happens, whatever, I can move on. And I think sometimes that is very helpful because a lot of times it's almost like when we panic and we switch our faith, it's like we forget that like we've gone through these things before. We've gone through so many similar occasions where we've successfully navigated it. It might not have been easy, not saying it was easy, but we got through it and overcame it. And I think those difficult moments are when we prove ourselves. So we want to keep encountering them, and it requires having faith that we can keep getting through them too. So kind of like just reminding yourself and imagining happening a lot and realize that, you probably respond very differently if it's happened that many times.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. Like it's so hard when I'm feeling really terrible to remind myself that I've gotten through it previously. Like I know that I do on an intellectual or rational level, but like it's always like, oh, but this feels so much worse. Ah, because you can't feel the pain from the previous one.
No, it's funny too. It's like we were talking about that in a couple of videos prior, but like, dude, the intellectual side, I feel like grasps these things pretty easily. But like our emotions and stuff are so strong and powerful, and our feelings and like, our physical feelings and all, they have a way of occupying. I mean, at least especially for me, dude, they have a way of occupying my concentration so much greater than like reason. Like I'll get
Well,
caught up working and stuff sometimes, and it's great. But like if I focus in on like, oh my God, my emotions or like discomfort, it's like I can't stop sometimes.
yeah, well, I think it's because they're like closer to the actual brainstem. Because the rational brain is like the neocortex, the big like ridge like thing on the outside. But the limbic brain and the reptilian brain, those are more of like associated with emotions and pain. And those are right next to the actual
Huh.
brainstem. So they like your rational mind might be trying to get through, but it's got to go through all these other layers of like pain and all this
That's
stuff.
a good point. Maybe it is that. Why do they call it the reptilian?
Oh,
What does
because
that
it's
have
just like
underneath?
instinctual. You know, there's
Oh,
no
like breathing
thought.
and stuff they mean, like, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. Like,
yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah. And like some like very very basic like responses or reflexes, like when you see a
Uh,
shadow just running and stuff like that.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Like flight or rally kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And like, yeah. Oh, that's
Hmm.
interesting. Huh.
Hmm.
That is funny that it's built that way too, right? That it is. It's like a more abstracted layer you're dealing with in reason. It uses a lot of the brain, but then you have these like things that are more like impulse, safety, security type things that like are well, it kind of makes sense though, right? Because you don't want to think about like if you're walking down the street and you see a shadow in an alley, it doesn't help to stop, look at it, analyze it. If it's something
Hmm.
bad, the bad thing's going to happen. You're better off running away first and laughing about it later than
Dude,
you are standing there.
you want to know how well that those like instincts work? So the other day I was going for a walk, and on the side of the street there was a dead snake, but like I just caught it out of the corner of my eye, and before I even knew it, I jumped. Like I didn't even look at it directly. I just caught it out of the corner of my eye and like jumped. And then afterwards I was like, "Oh my gosh, that reflex like works. That is
Yeah.
that is in there."
Dude, it always amazes me when it's like, especially when it's like peripheral vision, like stuff you normally like, because most of us don't train our peripheral vision. Like, it blows my mind how good it is when it works like that. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. But maybe that's it. Maybe that's our problem is like, from like a survival perspective, you want it to be first. You want that to be the first thing in order because yeah, you might feel silly afterwards, but you jumped. It was a dead snake, but if it was a live snake, you're better off getting further away when you don't know what kind of snake it is, right? So
Hmm.
like from that standpoint, it makes total sense. But the problem is that we haven't like, the world's developed so fast, so rapidly that we haven't like been able to like work this out to where like me realizing that, these are just papers I have to do or something, or it's just work I gotta do, like it's okay. Instead, I'm treating it like the snake and I'm jumping when I should stop and consider the situation more.
No, and it's so crazy because that's like not a trained response at all. Like never in my
Yeah.
life was I like, oh, snake, better jump. But it's like you got to think back in our evolution or development. Like snakes must have been so bad that like we needed to. The only people who survived to procreate were the ones who had the
He
gene that
jumped.
jumped out of the way when a snake comes.
Yeah, it's funny. Well,
Oh
I
God.
mean, like they say that, like I've heard that in history, like with genetic like development passing genes on, like it would have been the people that were like probably a little bit more cautious that would have probably made it more because if you were more brazen, there were so many unknowns in the world. There was no medicine. There was like no things to treat infections and stuff. So there's so many ways to die, that like being more cautious probably paid a lot and probably got you through life, a lot longer and allowed you to procreate more. So yeah, it makes sense.
Hmm.
And those are kind of more, like you said, I mean, they're closer to us. They're kind of more instinctual, more. responsive rather than like reflective type, responses. I mean, that makes it a lot harder to like, I think, mitigate them too.
Hmm. Yeah.
We don't live in that world anymore. See, that's the funny part. We don't live in that world of danger at every corner, you
Not
know?
even close.
And like, and I always wondered that too, because it's like I understand like if you grew up somewhere where there's like lots of high stressors, like it doesn't have it could be anywhere. Like even if you have like, I don't know, violence in your family or something like that, where like you have high stress all the time, I could see being like those things being amped up because your survival is amped up, right? But like most people, I don't think are in that situation anymore, where it's like it's that type of survivalism is necessary, or that sort of flight or fight's always necessary to turn on to the max.
Yeah, our senses are deadened nowadays. Definitely.
But
Um, so I was thinking about how to have faith because it is important. And not having faith in bad things, but having faith in good things because chances are things are going to work out. You know, there's a
yeah,
saying that, if everything's not working out, or no, that everything will work out in the end, and if it's not working out, it's not the end. So
yeah, there you go.
I know, right? And
Yeah,
if it's a saying, it's got to be true. So
always.
I think future visualization is important for having faith. Like actually being able to visualize whatever it is you want in your future is helpful. And there was something that I was listening to. So Jim Rohn, his mentor was called Earl Shoaff, and he was saying that not only do you have to visualize it, but then he was like, what would be proof that that thing actually happened, that you had that thing, and then try and live that now. So like, let's say that for you, it's like, you really need to have money, and it's like, well, what would be proof that that would have already happened? And maybe it's like, well, I would only have a 4-day work week or something like that. And it's like, well, do that now. And or something like that, so that you can like start training your brain that it's already happening now. It's just a matter of time until it actually occurs.
Yeah, it's like not only visualizing those goals in that future really carefully, but actually taking the steps now to make it a reality, which is, just part of the process, right? No, I think that's true because I think, you touch on something really important there too, which is that visualization that I've read a lot about recently, which is like people that feel imposter syndrome really, really bad, are usually often fail at things or drop out, think they're not good enough, even when they're on par with everybody else because they feel like they don't actually belong doing what they're doing, even if they really want it. And so visualization is a really important tool to start imagining yourself as deserving it, belonging, and having it, right? So that's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's just a matter of when, the time to get there, to build up those skills that you need to do the things you have to do to get there. That's it. And I really like what you said too, starting now to then start doing those things is really living intentionally and making your goals a reality, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think, that's a good one. It's funny when when you first mentioned this topic, the first thing I thought of too is that Soren Kierkegaard, he talked about faith as being like it's a subjective truth. Like it's something that's true for me. And really in a sense only true for me. Like it's not that something I can prove to somebody else, right? But it's just a belief that I hold that's necessary and true for me that helps me navigate this world, right? Make sense of it. And I think so faith in yourself can be like that. Like, they've done so many studies where they've shown that like it actually helps to sort of lie to ourselves a little bit, like to be a little bit delusional, because like that's where positivity often comes from. It's not that you don't know what the future is going to hold, but kind of like that positivity and that energy to deal with the day often just takes a little bit of lying to yourself. Or another way to phrase that is like a faith that things will be okay, that they'll work out, that you can get through it, that you can do it. Because I've noticed that so many times, where, like the people that have faith in themselves, even when they face a really hard challenge, they're more likely to stick it out and keep going until they just solve it. If you believe you can't do it, you're going to quit way earlier and give up because it's easier just to give up. It is. It's
Mm-hmm.
a simple thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, you just need a little bit of skill and the ability to keep going.
Yeah, yeah. That's really all it
Mm,
takes.
absolutely. Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
I yeah. I mean, I think it's necessary because I don't know. I mean, haven't you faced those times where you've given up way too early just because you felt like you couldn't do it or you couldn't do it anymore. It was too hard. And really, in reality, it's like, I mean, I sometimes wonder if it's like things I shouldn't have done or whatever, but like, in reality, I think we all are pretty much capable of doing whatever we want. It's just a matter of putting in the amount of time, the dedication, and, not stopping.
Yeah, yeah, exactly what you're saying there at the end, the not stopping part, because it's so hard for me at least. I don't know about other people's experience because, subjectively I only have this one. But for me, it's very difficult, or no, it's very easy to get started. I can have a lot of faith in the beginning that I can accomplish something.
Yeah.
And after it's already done, I can be like, yeah, of course I completed it. But it's like in the middle, when you're stuck in the routine, in the grind, in like whatever it is, where every day you're just doing a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And it's almost like even if you're keeping track of like your progress, it can still be so hard to actually see it in completion. That's where I struggle with the having faith when it's easy to give up.
Yeah, I think, the beginning's always fun and exciting. It's new. And it's the middle part where like you're putting in that real time to develop the real skills that you see the smallest amounts of gain. It's like when you're exercising, you hit those plateaus. Those are the hardest points because you got to work so much harder to surpass them. And I feel like the middle's like that in everything. The middle is often the point when you realize how little you know. Because in the beginning, it feels fun. You're like, I've learned all these stupid things about something. And in reality, you've learned the very like superficial layer, the surface. And that's a layer that's very apparent, very easy to grasp. But as you start to dig deeper, you start to get into the real problems. That's where like, it takes more time, takes more effort. And so the progress slows down. And I think, I think we all experience that. I've experienced that tons of times. I think programming is such a good example of that too, because you start out, it's like the beginning is usually pretty familiar. It's easy. It's like a lot of like just definitions and simple stuff. But then once you really get into it, it's like you do so many cool things, but it gets more complicated. And so the progression slows down a bit and it gets harder to make those really monumental leaps forward that you can really see the change. So I think you're right. You're living in that moment. So you're not seeing the change happen from the outside as easily. Whereas when you look back, it always feels like you see the whole thing happen in a shorter amount. So it's like, oh yeah, yeah, I did change a lot. I did all this stuff. But in the moment, it's like it feels like nothing's going forward, right? You're just
Mm-hmm.
pushing that boulder up the mountain over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's the only way that big stuff is built, by doing it like brick by brick. But in life, the examples that we get, we always see the finished house and we assume it was just done like that, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of difficult.
The older I've gotten, the more I've realized that we are vastly underprepared. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about. Like, I don't know what it is about society, about culture, about anything. Like, and it's funny that people seem to want, like, if they went through school, they want things done the same way as when they were there, instead of like realizing that maybe changes to be better. Like, it just cracks me up. But like, we're not. We don't. We don't really get informed on how to respond to these sorts of things. How to deal with like anxiety, stress, how to deal with overcoming obstacles, how to deal with overcoming difficulties, how to pursue goals, how to even formalize our goals. Like we're not really taught all these things that would really help us later on. And so sometimes I think it feels very difficult because we're also trying to learn all these things that we should theoretically have had a grasp on earlier, maybe, or would at least help if we did earlier. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, we're very aversive to change because a lot of time, like, I mean, whenever I think of change, I always think of these things that were comfortable that became uncomfortable. I don't oftentimes think about how that discomfort caused me to grow, which then resulted in better things from it. I just think of the
Yeah.
immediate discomfort, but it's true that like I mean, these things can cause nobody wants to change, but like it's one of those things that's necessary.
It's gonna happen and it's necessary, like you can't stop
Yeah,
it.
that's the thing. It's going to happen whether you want to or not.
Yeah. I maybe that's a way to think about it. It's like faith is playing like an active role in your change rather than taking a passive role in like your change is you're gonna change. Time's gonna change. The world around you is gonna change, and you can either be an active participant in it or you can be like sort of a bystander. I think if you're an active participant, you're much likelier to have a better life. How many, I mean, I've heard so many like entrepreneurs or people who have been successful say the same thing, which is like, you only fail once you give up. Like really failing. in and of itself is not a problem. It's a learning experience. The only time you really fail is when you quit. As long as you keep trying, you still could be successful. It's just, you just need one more time, right? And I think you always say,
Hmm.
like, it was the McDonald's founder who was like, just this once, let it work.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
like he's tried so many times. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I think, that takes faith in yourself. Then. And sometimes it has to be kind of blind in a certain sense because you just have to keep going.
Hmm. Yeah, you never know. So it's kind of possibly like having faith is just believing that whatever circumstances you're up against right now are actually working for you as opposed to working against you.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it too. Or that you just that no matter what it is anyway, you can get through it. That you possess the resilience and the strength and the ability to overcome it, even if it means detouring sometimes, like having to learn something new, having to, maybe change your plans a little bit because the way you were going about it was maybe incorrect or something. But there's a way forward. It's just you got to find that path that you can then walk it again.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess just, have faith. That's all.
Believe in yourself. Come on, it's not that hard. All
Yeah.
right, so
Cool. Well, anything else you want to add to this one?
uh, I guess just remind yourself how many times you've gotten through things already before. You can do it again, and if you don't give up, you will get there eventually. It might not be easy,
Mm.
but you'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, don't let what you haven't got stop you.
Yeah, it's going to.
Like, okay. So, like, recent, all the time, I suffer with this, I'm not going to survive mentality. Like,
Oh God, yeah,
I look back, and it's almost my whole entire life. I've thought, like, I'm not going to make it. And this is going on 40 years now. I've been thinking I'm not going to make it. And yet I still keep making it. And it's like, when I took some time to reflect on it, I was like, well, I've always thought this. And right now, I have more skills than I've ever had, more connections than I've ever had, more money than I've ever had. Like all these different things that now are more than I've ever had, like resources, like my resourcefulness now is way more than anything that I've ever
yeah,
had in my previous life. So if I've ever survived anything in the past, it's only proof that I'm going to survive that much easier now.
yeah. You have all this extra stuff that you didn't have before, right? So it's like, and it's like it's true though. I think that's a good point. Like if you just look at it in terms of time, you're older, so you have more skill sets, you have more abilities, you have more, hopefully more money, a better position and all. So yeah, if you could have survived it in the past, you can definitely do it. There's no reason why you can't. And that's a very important thing to think about. That's a good point. It's
Hmm.
funny how that slips our mind though immediately, really in the moment, right?
Out the window every day, every day out the window.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that's the other thing too is people forget too is it's just like uh, I don't think there is a perfect solution. I think it's just having faith in yourself is like everything else. It takes constant reinforcement, constantly reminding yourself, and a lot of times it takes laughing at yourself when you screw up because it's bound to happen again, like it does every time.
Yeah, and not beating yourself up too much.
Yeah,
Like I'm guilty of this, like, geez, just taking it out on myself every time I mess up. Or even if I don't do like my expectation of what my normal should be is perfect. Like
yeah,
anything
yeah.
short of perfect, and I'm like, what the heck?
Why am I failing? It's
Yeah.
funny. I was thinking about that the other day because I feel like I've struggled with the same thing, and I do wonder if part of that is from like the empty, vague notion of expectations placed on you in your youth that are like ill-defined and like sky's the limit type nonsense, right? That like sets you up for this belief that things should always be like this really extreme good, which is like, it's unrealistic and crazy.
Dude, I last week I like recognized that I'm still trying to impress my grandfather, who's been dead for over like 10 years now. Like I'm
Yeah, I don't
still
think he's right
trying
about
to.
it.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think he's worried about it either. But like I had this realization. I'm like, why am I still trying to impress him? He doesn't care. He's gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
You know, sometimes I think we're trying to still live up to like the image we have of that person too and all. And it's hard. It is. It's difficult. But I think that's the problem too. We carry all this stuff. We're complex organisms. We're not simple creatures. We are
mhm,
simple in a lot of ways, but we're not completely simple. So yeah.
mhm. Yeah. So in a nutshell, like Danny said, just have faith. It's not that hard.
Yeah,
except
just
when
do
it
it.
is, which is pretty much all
Except
the time.
almost always.
So that's all for this episode of the
Uh,
Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 201, our third season
Woo!
of the show already. Yeah.
I know.
Uh, Make sure to check us out on YouTube, all the podcasting services, like, share, subscribe. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later on.